Welcome to this first podcast episode of the Higher Self podcast. I'm your host, Tanya, and in this podcast, I want to talk a lot about intuition and self image healing and the laws of the universe and just how you can create everything in your life and how you influence the creation of everything in your life. Because I have always been very obsessed with the concept of manifestation. I can so vividly remember the day that I first learned that manifestation existed, and it was with The Secret, which I think a lot of people have the same experience with. Like, The Secret was kind of the stone that brought everything into rolling, I think. And I mean, I'm so grateful that I found it, and I'm grateful for all of the manifestation coaches that I found afterwards because they brought me, like, eventually, I wouldn't have been where I'm right now without them. But at the same time, a lot of the concepts that are taught in the manifestation world or in the spiritual world, whatever, like in this bubble, a lot of that is just not the entire truth that there is to it. And sometimes this missing piece can be the reason you can't manifest something that you would otherwise be able to create in your life. You know what I mean? So, in this first episode, I want to talk a lot about what even consciousness is and maybe touch on a few of the universal laws and just lay the base for everything that follows afterwards. You may be able to hear my cats in the background from time to time. I'm not sure. Maybe they're sleeping. They're behind the camera. Okay. First of all, let me start with everything in this podcast. And by the way, I have my notes in front of me. So if I look to the side, it's because they're my notes. And I tend to go all over the place if I don't have notes in order. So, yeah. Everything in this podcast is supposed to expand your view on the world and your beliefs. So if anything sounds limiting, I probably have explained it wrong. So just so you know. Then let me start with consciousness. You may or may not have heard that there are certain frequencies in the world, and your soul vibrates on a certain frequency. The highest frequency your soul can reach is 1,000 frequency, which is like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna level. If you are at a frequency of 400 and higher, that's also very high. Like, I will get to the different levels, but just so you have an overall view of what's a low frequency and what's a high frequency, and just so you know, if your soul were to vibrate on a 180 frequency, which sounds very low, it technically is a low frequency, but that doesn't mean that you are not a light being. Like, frequencies don't how do you say it? They're not responsible for how light or dark someone's energy is. Of course, there are light beings, and you are a light being, otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to this. And even if you aren't, like, if you have friends who are not interested in this kind of stuff, that doesn't mean that they are not a light being. But there are also absent of light beings. But this is not what I mean with frequencies. If you are, like, I would say 80 to 90% of the planet are on an average of a 180 to 190 frequency. And like, this is like the first level of consciousness. Like 1 to 388 frequency is the first level, and this is all about like learning to love yourself. Like every level of consciousness and therefore frequency has its own lessons to come with. So 1 to 388 is the level of consciousness where you want to learn how to start loving yourself, because it's ultimately the goal, like unconditional love for yourself. That's where we want to get. And just because you've surpassed or may have surpassed the 388 frequency doesn't mean that this level of consciousness or like the level of lessons aren't coming up again. So you could be a 450 frequency being and you would still have to go back to learning the lesson of loving yourself unconditionally. Loving yourself, like self-love, the definition of self-love is putting yourself first in every situation. And I know this may sound selfish and narcissistic, but it's not. Hear me out. Let's say you're a mother and you have a little baby at home. Think about how much better you could be there for your child if you were to fill your own cup first and take care of some of your own needs first, something like sleep. Like if you were to sleep more through the night and be more energized the next morning. And I'm not telling you that if you can't do this, you were doing something wrong, or that it's possible for everyone. If you can't sleep through the night with a baby, that's totally a reflection. And I think like 99% of parents have this reflection, so it's not like you were doing something wrong. We will get back to reflections at a later point in another podcast episode. But this is also not just like, I'm not here to tell you what to do. This is more as an example for how could I feel good about putting myself first, because that's an example that may have come up with how could I put myself first and feel good about it when I have a little baby at home. Your baby, like I know babies may not seem like it, but they do notice everything around them and which energy we give them. There's this one video of a mother who showed the baby different emotions, and then she didn't show any emotions at all, and the baby was completely freaking out when the mother didn't show any emotions. So babies do notice a lot more than some people may think. And babies also recognize how much energy you can give them. And you can only give your child as much energy as you have. You know what I mean? Like you can't give them more energy than you have. So the more energy you have yourself, the more energy you can also give your baby. That's what I wanted to say with that. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying if you can't sleep through the night, you're doing something wrong or something like that. Please don't come at me. It's just as an example of how putting yourself first is a good thing in every situation. And putting yourself first could also mean something like when a friend asks you if you can drive them to the airport, going to the gas station before, that's putting yourself first, because you're making sure you have enough gas to get to the airport and back to your home stress-free, because you probably would be stressed a lot if your gas ran out throughout the way and your friend is stressing you out then because they may miss their flight and everything. So putting gas in your car before you drive them to the airport is also putting yourself first while you are doing something for another person. So self-love is the lesson that souls want to start learning on the first level of consciousness. But as I said, it will come back on later levels again. Like even if you are about a 450 frequency, again and again there will be lessons of you having to put yourself first and learning how to put yourself first is important. Okay. Also, when it comes to self-love, because I know when you think of self-love, you often think of just like your physical body or the attributes that you have or not have. And you have way more attributes than you think you have. Like we have over 4,000 attributes. So your spirit self, your soul, designed you perfectly. And it's our task to see how that's true and learn how it's true and how our perceived imperfections are actually perfect for the life that we want to create. So if you have something, it doesn't matter if it's an attribute that you think you have that you perceive as negative, or if it's something on your body or a body part of yours that you don't like. Everything is created perfectly, and seeing how it's perfect for what we want to create is the lesson that our soul gave us with that. You know what I mean? So the next level of consciousness, so the ones that are 389 and above, that's the next level of consciousness, and it comes with new conscious understandings and lessons. And those people are here to be leaders and teachers in the world and kind of carve ahead paths for the younger generation of souls. Those are often the ones that are called as like getting called crazy, because they often have concepts, or they can often see things, not see with the physical eye, but like see potentials that other people cannot see, and therefore get called crazy for that. Also, only around 0.0002% of the planet are at this second level of consciousness, so it's not a lot. So it's like at a 400 and slightly higher frequency. And everything like creation based tends to be more difficult for them, because they really want to help and follow what their soul pulls them to do. But it's easy, as I said, it's easy to forget those earlier lessons about self-love, for example, and how to put themselves first in every situation. And especially if you are someone who wants to help a lot, it's very easy to forget to put yourself first too. What is also required is the willingness to learn and understand the source truth of everything, and learn how the laws of the universe work, and almost most importantly, develop your intuition. At the beginning of this work, you may feel like the world comes crashing down on you when you realize you really do create everything in life. Like, I think with the manifestation world, we often think that we only create the good stuff, and like bigger things like creating a lot of money or creating dream relationships, but we do really create everything. So even if you cut your finger, you have created that situation. Or if you stub your toe or something like that, it's like all of those smaller moments are also created by us. And your ego might tell you it's not your fault, but it kind of is. Like, it's not really your fault, like you didn't know better. And if you don't know about reflections and how the creative field works, it's not really, you're not doing it consciously, so it's not your fault in that sense. But you do, like, it also means you do have the scepter, you hold the scepter in your hand, and you can shift those situations and make it so that you don't stub your toe, for example, or if you're a mother that you can't sleep through the night. And you can just create all of the what we perceive as good situations in life. But all of this is going to get covered in later podcast episodes like creation and the law of reflections and other laws of the universe and concepts that are important for this to understand. Just for your information, people like in this realm, in this third realm that we are in, people are not like people with 700 frequency and above are not supposed to be in this realm. This realm will hold up to 492 frequency, and beings with a higher frequency than that are here to make the planet what it was designed to be. But that's a rabbit hole you can go down to. I just wanted to add it because I think it's interesting to know. Also, and this may be triggering for some people, but most conscious expansion, so most, like if you want to raise your frequency, most of that comes through obstacles, heavy circumstances, and therefore trauma. But when we make it through that, there's one thing that always happens. We are smarter, we are stronger, and we tend to always be grateful for who we have become on the other side of it, unless we don't work through it and we don't see how it's the best thing that could ever happen to us and like apply everything that you're basically going to learn here. But if you do, it's going to be so great and you're going to be so happy that you've lived the life that you've lived and that you are where you are right now in your life. And yeah, we tend to avoid obstacles and trauma and try to run away from it because it's more comfortable in the moment. And I don't want to sound like a lifestyle coach here, but we have to get out of our comfort zone to grow and to get where, like, to fulfill your soul pull and everything. And soul pull is also another concept that I'm going to explain more in depth in another podcast episode. But your soul pull is basically what your soul pulls you to, just like the name says, like your purpose, what you're supposed to do in your life. And for that, you need those obstacles and all of those heavier circumstances to happen, because if you don't learn from them, how you're supposed to teach other people, how you're going to help other people through similar stuff. And it doesn't mean that your soul pull is to help people who experience similar trauma as you did. Like, that's not what I'm saying with this. But all of the lessons that you've learned by overcoming your traumas and overcoming obstacles, they make you the person that you are, who then can fulfill their soul purpose, whatever it is. If it's helping people or if it's being a leader, whatever. You can't be a leader if you've never learned all the lessons you need to be a good leader. You know what I mean? So you have the option to be thrown into the fire anyway, because you're going to, like, you can't run away from it. So you have the option to be thrown into the fire. You can walk above it, like, or walk through it, like those people who run above. No, how do you say it? Who walk through those hot lava stones or whatever it is. I don't know, like that one episode in The Office where Pam ran across the lava stones. Whatever, you know what I mean. And choosing to voluntarily walk through it is so much easier, let me tell you, especially if you learn how to develop your intuition and learn how to overcome all of those obstacles in a much easier way, or how to With intuition, you'll be able to learn the lessons without even the need to have the obstacle in the first place. You know what I mean? So you are not running away from the obstacle, but the obstacle doesn't need to come because you've already learned the lesson. That's why you want to start learning how to use your intuition. And there are so many other reasons for that, but that's one of it. Okay. I'm just looking at my notes to see if I forgot anything, but I think that's all I wanted to say in this first episode. If you've listened until now, thank you so much. I hope you've learned something. And again, if anything that I've explained sounded limiting, I explained it wrong. Anyway, this is how you're going to create a life that may be unthinkable at this point, and a life where you are accessing your greatest potentials. And this is exactly what I've created this podcast for. So thanks again for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.